Congress didn't just slow President Donald Trump down, it overruled him in a way no modern president has experienced on trade authority. In a vote that stunned Washington, the United States Senate moved first. 22 Republican senators joined every Democrat to pass the North American Trade Stability Act by a margin of 71 to 29. The House followed hours later, 298 to 137, with 61 Republicans breaking ranks. Both margins cleared the two-thirds threshold required to override a veto. Both votes were decisive, and both sent a message rarely delivered to a sitting president by his own party. This line cannot be crossed. The reaction inside Trump's orbit was immediate, but not theatrical. There was no all-caps post, no rally stage eruption. According to lawmakers and aides familiar with the aftermath, the president made a series of brief phone calls to Republican senators who had supported the bill. Each conversation reportedly lasted only minutes. The tone, those briefed on the call said, was controlled and deliberate. The message was simple. Political consequences were coming. While that was unfolding in Washington, an unexpected voice weighed in from Omaha. At a shareholder gathering for Berkshire Hathaway, legendary investor Warren Buffett addressed the vote. Over the past year, Buffett had issued unusually blunt warnings about American economic stewardship, even shifting capital abroad in response to policy volatility. But this time, his remarks struck a different chord. He described the congressional vote not as dysfunction, but as constitutional design at work, a demonstration that the separation of powers still functions under strain. To understand why historians are comparing this moment to the Republican break from Richard Nixon during the Watergate era, you have to step back to the Senate floor on the day of the vote. The chamber was packed. No absences, no procedural maneuvers. Senators understood the weight of what they were about to do. In the galleries sat reporters, staffers, and visitors from states hit hardest by the tariff standoff. Farmers, auto workers, business owners who had traveled long distances to witness the outcome. The bill itself was bipartisan from inception. Its primary Republican sponsor came from Iowa, a state battered by retaliatory Canadian tariffs on corn, soybeans, and pork. His Democratic co-author represented Michigan, where supply chain disruptions and cross-border retaliation had shuttered plants and driven fuel costs higher. The two senators, who had rarely collaborated before, spent weeks assembling support across party lines with a blunt argument. The president's trade actions were inflicting measurable damage on their states. When the Iowa senator rose to speak, he did so without prepared remarks. He acknowledged his past support for the president. He made clear this was not a partisan conversion, but he argued that fidelity to constituents outweighed loyalty to any administration. Farmers in his state were losing export markets built over generations. Bankruptcies were rising. Land values were sliding. "We were not elected to defend policies that hollow out our own communities," he said in substance, if not in those exact words. The roll call began. As Republican yes votes accumulated, the press gallery shifted from skepticism to urgency. Once the count crossed 67, the veto-proof mark, the result was sealed. Applause broke out from the gallery, an unusual breach of Senate decorum that reflected the intensity of the moment. The final tally, 71 in favor, 29 opposed. The legislation did more than nullify existing tariffs. It fundamentally restructured trade authority regarding America's North American partners. First, it terminated all tariffs on Canadian goods enacted through executive action under the current administration. Steel, aluminum, lumber, dairy, agriculture, automotive components. The measures were rescinded immediately upon enactment. Second, it narrowed the president's ability to invoke Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, the national security provision previously used to justify broad tariffs. Under the new framework, Section 232 authority cannot be applied unilaterally to Canada or Mexico absent explicit congressional review. Third, the law requires affirmative congressional approval for any future tariffs exceeding 5% on goods from USMCA partners. A president may propose such measures, but they cannot take effect without a majority vote in both chambers. Finally, the bill established an automatic review mechanism. Should any administration attempt to circumvent the restrictions through alternative statutory pathways, Congress must hold a rapid up or down vote within 48 hours. No procedural delays, no extended committee bottlenecks, a direct decision. In effect, lawmakers constructed guardrails designed to outlast a single presidency. The House vote that followed was equally consequential. 61 Republicans sided with Democrats. The geographic spread was telling. Members from Michigan, Alabama, Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and Iowa, states deeply integrated into cross-border trade networks, concluded the economic cost at home outweighed party unity. For many, the decision was shaped less by ideology than by lived impact. In Iowa, farmers faced shrinking export channels after Canadian countermeasures targeted agricultural products. Financial stress mounted. At town halls, constituents presented bank notices and balance sheets, asking their senator why policies pursued in Washington were undermining livelihoods built over decades. In Alabama, a major automotive investment was halted amid tariff uncertainty, threatening thousands of jobs and secondary economic activity. Local officials confronted the prospect of stalled development and downgraded municipal projections. In Michigan, parts delays and cross-border bottlenecks disrupted manufacturing corridors long considered among the most productive in North America. Workers faced layoffs. Fuel prices spiked amid logistical strain. Viral town hall exchanges between lawmakers and constituents amplified the pressure. Behind closed doors, business groups intensified lobbying efforts. Organizations representing manufacturers, energy producers, and agricultural exporters warned that sustained tariff escalation risked long-term competitiveness. Donor networks signaled that economic stability, not rhetorical escalation, would guide future support. Then came Buffett's remarks in Omaha. He acknowledged prior criticism of American policy decisions. He reiterated that damage had been done, factories closed, capital reallocated, alliances strained. But he framed Congress's action as evidence that institutional correction remains possible. In his view, the system's capacity for self-adjustment, even belated and imperfect, was itself a source of resilience. Back in Washington, Trump vetoed the bill as expected. In his veto message, he argued that Congress had weakened executive flexibility and undermined leverage in trade negotiations. Constitutional scholars countered that Article 1 of the Constitution grants Congress authority to regulate commerce with foreign nations, authority it had chosen to reclaim. The override votes proceeded. Both chambers met the two-thirds requirement. The law took effect. Politically, the consequences remain uncertain. The president has pledged to support primary challengers against Republican defectors. Some of those lawmakers have responded by emphasizing their district's economic interests over partisan alignment. Whether voters reward or punish that stance will shape the next electoral cycle. Economically, the repeal of tariffs may stabilize markets and restore some cross-border predictability. But analysts caution that reversing policy does not instantly repair lost contracts or rebuild trust with trading partners. Historically, the episode may be remembered less for the tariffs themselves than for the constitutional dynamic it revealed. When one branch of government asserted expansive authority over trade, another branch responded by reasserting its own. The confrontation did not resolve every economic challenge. It did, however, redefine the boundaries of presidential power in North American trade policy. For supporters of strong executive authority, the vote represents a constraint. For advocates of congressional oversight, it represents a recalibration. For markets, it offers a measure of clarity. And for historians, it stands as one of the most significant intra-party breaks between a president and members of his own coalition in modern American political life. The long-term impact will depend on how future presidents navigate the new framework, and whether Congress maintains the willingness to defend the institutional authority it has just reclaimed.